It's fall. So I'm very excited, as you can see with the sweatshirt. If you love fall, which I hope you do, it's our time to shine. So welcome to the Women's Power Collaborative. Welcome to the 10th Lunch and Learn we have had this year. This is Lunch and Learn number 10. Unbelievable. It is called Helping Women Get Elected with Public Funding for Elections. It is hosted by Cindy Black, who you see on the screen, Executive Director of Fix Democracy First. So I think what we can do before I get into it and pass it over to Cindy is what would be helpful is if everyone can go over to the chat, introduce yourself, the organization you work for, your name, where you live, what's the temperature? Is it fall there like it is in Maine? I don't know. Go ahead and put that in the chat. Say hello and introduce yourself. And I will get into my little spiel before we hand it over to Cindy. So for those of you who are here, who are new, and you're like, where am I? What's going on? I clicked a link and now I'm here. I'm going to set the scene. My name is Victoria Pelletier and I'm the National Partnerships Manager with Represent Women. For those of you who are getting familiar with Represent Women, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit that is dedicated to system strategies that help build women's political power so more of us can run and win and serve and lead. So if you care about women and women's representation, you are in the right spot. And one of our programs is this. It is the Women's Power Collaborative, which is the only national level platform of its kind that combines women's representation with the efforts focused on democracy reform. So if you are not yet a member of the Women's Power Collaborative, don't hesitate to sign up on the Represent Women website. It is free and it is fast. And we would love to have you because we have resources and we have research, we have networking opportunities, we have regional group meetings that allow you all time to meet your neighbors, see who's doing what, state work, city work. There's a lot happening. So it's a great way to get to know other organizations in your state that are working towards women's political power. And of course, in the Women's Power Collaborative, we have this monthly lunch and learns where we all get together, spend an hour together, either lunch or breakfast, depending on your time zone, and hear from experts in their field as we all, again, work towards boosting women's political power. So some housekeeping items before I hand it over to Cindy. We will have until 2 p.m. here or 11 a.m. Pacific time. So this will be an hour, and there will be a presentation by Cindy and then some Q&A and some discussion at the end. The chat is open, so please feel free to continue to engage there. For the new people that have come in, just your name, the organization you work for, where you live, what's the weather like, anything you would like to put in the chat. And also this session is being recorded. So we will share it out once that recording is ready, and we'll make sure that all of you get a copy. That recording will also live on the Women's Power Collaborative platform. So again, if you're not a member, please go ahead and find your way to the Represent Women website, and we'll make sure we put the link in the chat for you as well to get you to be a member of this platform. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Cindy and let you take it away. And again, any questions that come up that you don't want to forget, you can go ahead and put it in the chat and we will do a little bit of Q&A at the end. But Cindy, thank you so much for being here and please take it away.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. So today we're going to be talking about helping women get elected with public funding for elections. A little bit about myself. I'm the executive director of Fix Democracy First. We're based in Washington State, though we support other state reforms as well as federal reforms, but mostly we focus on Washington State. Our organization has been around for 21 years. We started as Washington Public Campaigns to work on public funding for elections. And then we changed our name to Fix Democracy First in 2014 to work on a broader range of democracy-related issues. Also, a few years ago, we started our Women in Office Now program that works to support and train women who are interested in running for office in Washington State. So we're going to be talking about money in elections, in particular public funding, and how public funding can actually help women be able to run and win an election. So let's jump in there. Some of the things we're going to talk about today is about why empower small donors, because public funding is about empowering small donors, and how can that impact women running for office. We're going to talk about different types of public funding. And then I'm going to go over just a little bit about public funding here in Washington State and focus on the Seattle Voucher Program because it's a very unique program, just to show one state's history about how we got to public funding. what are the benefits of public funding, where is it being used, and how we can protect and expand public funding if you don't have it in your area. And then we'll have some Q&A after that. So, why do we want to empower small donors? Well, if you follow money in politics, you know that a lot of money comes in from outside sources, sometimes foreign interests, through a variety of channels, through super PACs. Oftentimes, the people with the most money is who wins elections. But we found when we are able to empower small donors through public funding programs, we're able to elect people that reflect the population a lot better. I have this one cartoon that shows, here's an example of like the 1% drowning out the 99%. When we've gotten decisions like Citizens United back in 2010 and the McCutcheon decision that followed afterwards, that really opened the floodgates for a ton of money coming in. Um, the only way we can overturn a Supreme Court decision like Citizens United is the court has to reverse itself, like we saw with Roe v. Wade, or we need a constitutional amendment, which doesn't seem like that's going to happen very soon. But there are some things we can do, and one of the things we can do is public funding of elections. That's been had many court challenges and it's won. And so that is one thing we actually can do to address big money in politics and help empower small donors. So, what kind of systems are commonly used? There are three types of systems: small donor matching, grant based programs, and voucher programs. And I'm going to go over a little bit of each one of those to explain what they are. So, small donor matching programs, these programs match small contributions to qualifying candidates with public funds according to whatever specified ratio. It can be something like 6 to 1, 2 to 1. Just depends on the state. Each state or jurisdiction that has small donor matching programs varies. Some are progressive. They start at 1, but then if they go on to the general, might be different for the primary election versus the general election. So each jurisdiction kind of decides what they want. Some are going up to even higher to 6 to 1, but these are matching programs. So, for example, if you get a $20 donation from somebody, that matching fund can say it's a 5 to 1, you'd get $100 to that. So that can double, triple, quadruple, and so forth those donations. So it actually just makes those small donations a lot bigger through these matching programs. And then there's grant-based programs, sometimes referred to clean elections, fair elections, citizen-funded elections. These provide full funding for candidates to run their campaigns. So uh, oftentimes no fundraising is necessary or maybe even allowed to be used depending on the program. Again, each jurisdiction develops their own rules because there's not one general rule for these type of programs. So, for example, but you oftentimes in also back to the matching program, and this is true of all public funding programs, is that usually there's some criteria that you have to qualify. You have to apply for the program. Sometimes you have to get so many small donations to qualify, so many signatures in your area, just to know that you're a viable candidate. And so not everybody can just go ahead and go, hey, I'm just going to run for office and collect this money. No, you actually have to show that you have support, at least a certain percentage of support in your community to get these type of funds. With the grant-based program, you have to it tends to be a little stricter sometimes depending on the program where you have to follow certain guidelines. Oftentimes with these programs you have to agree to things like debating your opponents, and a variety of other things that you have to um, qualify for. Some you can't take certain donations over a certain amount. There's limits, so a lot of those type of things that are part of these. And then the final type of program that is less common is a voucher, or some people call it democracy dollars programs that provide like a coupon to individuals to donate to candidates or sometimes a party or political committee who can redeem the voucher for campaign funds. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Seattle program because that's pretty unique. But those are the main three types of programs for public funding. Doesn't mean there may not be some new programs that get created out there, but these are the existing ones right now. So let's talk a little bit about a brief history of public funding in Washington state. Again, this is just one state's example of public funding, the different iterations it's gone through. So back in the 1980s, public funding was adopted in the city of Seattle and King County, where Seattle is located. So we had public funding back in the 80s. But then in 1992, there was an initiative passed and it had some other things in there, some good government stuff. But inside this initiative, had some wording that a lot of people didn't pay attention to that prohibited public funding in Washington state elections. So all of a sudden, after this initiative, and it did pass, public funding was not allowed in the state. That's when our organization, Washington Public Campaigns, back then, now Fixed Democracy First, decided to form. And they were very interested in going, hey, we want public funding of elections, so we need to overturn this law. So worked for many years to overturn the law, and finally in 2008, a Senate bill passed that removed the prohibition for local governments to pass public funding of elections. Um, then and there was also several years in between where there were a lot of different things tossed around. Seattle decided they wanted to bring back public funding of elections. They first tried to get the city council to pass something in 2013. That didn't work. So they collected enough signatures and was able to pass Initiative 122 in 2015 for the Democracy Voucher Program. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about that. It's getting a lot of attention these days, and there's a lot going on with that. There was also a statewide initiative. This was led by groups like Represent Us and League of Women Voters, Initiative 1464 on the ballot for public funding statewide, but it did not pass, and for a variety of reasons that I won't get into. But one thing you want to do is build a coalition in your state before you try to pass a statewide initiative. I'll just say that much. And then this past year in 24, in this legislative session, we introduced a statewide democracy voucher program for statewide legislative races. Unfortunately, it didn't move forward. We're going to get it reintroduced in the next session, but it's ongoing. And also with the Seattle initiative, it needs to be renewed every 10 years. It's funded by a small property tax, which averages about $8 a year per property owner. But it has to be up for renewal next year or we'll run out of funding. So we're actively working on renewing that levy so that program will continue. So the voucher program, this gives each eligible resident in Seattle four $25 vouchers, which they can give to any participating candidate of their choice, whether it's for a mayor's race, city council, or city attorney. So those are the positions that can be used for. It's also open to any eligible legal resident, so green card holders are able to use these as well. So if you're 18 or older and you're a legal resident in the state or in the city, you don't have to be even a registered voter to use your vouchers. As long as you're a legal resident, you are able to use these vouchers. So, and that people ask, well, why legal residents? Well, legal residents are allowed to donate to elections federally, locally. So that's just going along with current law that allows legal residents to give money to elections. Now I want to share a short video. Hopefully this will work. I have a backup plan if it doesn't, and it tells you a little bit about the program.
Our current campaign finance system is really dominated by wealthy special interests, and the problem with this is the big supporters of candidates end up having a disproportionate influence over policy once those candidates are in office. In an ideal system, a candidate's donor base would look more like the candidate's constituents. Public financing changes the incentives for candidates and gets a larger pool of the population contributing in elections. And the Democracy Voucher Program in Seattle is a very innovative form of public financing.
This was a citizens initiative, which is kind of a big feature out here on the West Coast. They collected the signatures and got it on the ballot, and it passed 2-1. The Democracy Voucher Program distributes 4 $25 vouchers to every registered voter in the city of Seattle, and they can contribute those $100 in vouchers to any participating candidate who qualifies for the program.
I'm running for city council because I want to make sure that everybody in this city can afford to live in the place that they work.
Teresa Mosqueda is a community activist who had been working in the community for, I believe over a decade. She herself said that she still had rent to pay, she still had student loans to pay, so running for office was never in the books until something like democracy vouchers came along. And because of that, she ran and she won.
And when we don't allow for affordable housing,
We've seen so many different changes that have come out of the Democracy Voucher Program. We've seen more community-based candidates that do champion community issues being able to really be elected and run for office who normally wouldn't. We've seen more young people giving than ever before. And we've also seen an 84% increase in new donors. So more people are participating. They look more like the city, younger, they're more people of color. And the people who are running for office as a result are more in tune with the city's needs and have actually been champions of the city's needs and the community's needs for quite so many years. This program is really important to our democracy because we really need to make sure that our community voices are uplifted and amplified.
The thing that's really groundbreaking about this system is that all of a sudden every citizen in the city is a potential contributor to elections. And this is a big change from how most campaigns are financed.
I think what's important about public financing in the long term is ideally we'll get an elected body that looks more like us. It'll be people who are sitting around their table trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent and keep a roof over their head and get their kids through school. And I think that's the true promise of public financing, that people who will get elected won't be millionaires. They'll be people who have broad public support and are able to run a good campaign with public dollars.
Okay, so a little bit about that video. It's a few years old, but it's still really relevant. Some of the things that Liz was talking about in the film there is that many things have changed with the election since then. We've seen the amount of people have gone down, like the average donation because of the vouchers. Before, it was a lot of wealthy people, in particular, certain neighborhoods that were pretty much donating to elections. And now we see people across the city donating and using it. There's also been some studies that low propensity in first-time voters, if they use their voucher, they're more likely to vote in the election. It has opened the door for many people that normally could not have run to run a viable campaign. In the last election, and Seattle has odd year elections. This year's has a special election, so it's a little bit different. We only have like one seat that's being filled because Teresa Mosqueda, who you saw in the film, now has gone on to King County Councils. So now she's on the county council. But she's been a real great advocate for voucher program, and we're hoping to eventually expand that program to King County and other jurisdictions as well. So let's talk about what are some of these benefits of public funding, because there's quite a bit. And we saw some of those things talked about in the little film we just showed. It fosters diversity in the electoral process, not just with the candidates, because we've seen a more diverse candidates than ever. Most candidates have used the program that are now on the council, except for one. All the candidates have used it, the mayor has used it, the city attorneys have used it. So we've seen a big uptick in people using it. What's funny, when the program first started, campaign managers and things like that were telling candidates to not use the program, but that has completely turned around, and almost every candidate now uses the program. The big thing we've seen with this, and not just in Seattle, but in places like New York and others, is that it has enabled more women and women of color to run and get elected, because oftentimes women identify money as being one of the biggest barriers to being able to run for office and actually run a viable campaign so they can win. But with public funding in elections, it enables women to run for office, run a viable campaign, and enable them to win elections. And we've seen more women get elected in public funding programs. So this has been a real important barrier to break down with these type of programs. It also promotes more competitive races where it's not the person with the most money that necessarily wins the election. It also, again, opens the door for people in the community that live and work in the community, that are renters, lower income folks, and be more competitive. It also encourages voter-centered campaigns and focuses on policies and issues because, for example, in the city of Seattle, everybody pretty much is a potential donor. If you're a legal resident, then you can talk to everybody. You don't have to have these big fundraising dinners, $1,000 a plate or whatever the donation limit is to raise a bunch of money, or rely on PACs and things like that. You can rely on everyday people. So door knocking is a big thing that happens in the city, where candidates knock on doors in their district, because everybody is a potential donor. Uh, and that makes the candidates more accountable to their constituents, because you're able to talk more about what the policies and issues that matter to them in their neighborhood, and more accountable to your constituents because they're all donors. It has also expanded civic engagement involvement with the general populace. We've seen that in Seattle. We've seen that in other places that use public funding, because it allows everyday regular people to be able to participate that would never normally be able. What we've seen, like with the Seattle program, is that most people that have used their vouchers have never donated to a campaign ever before because they just didn't have the money. Now they're a donor. And so they're more involved now. They're committed. And we've seen people get more active out of that. And as I mentioned, it increases accountability to constituents rather than big donors and special interests. And it hasn't eliminated super PACs. It never was meant to do that, because there's other things that need to happen to eliminate that. But has definitely enabled people a more avenue into politics that could never be there before. And it empowers small donors and everyday citizens. And that's what we want. We want the voice of the people to be heard and get people elected that are accountable to everyday people. So these are just some of the benefits of public funding. And especially for women, these are the type of programs that can really empower women to be able to run for office and actually win elections. And pass policies that are important to them, like childcare, healthcare, schools, other types of issues, reproductive health, things like that. So that is really important. I'm going to talk a little bit now about where public funding is being used. A lot of people don't realize this, but we do have public funding for presidential elections. It has a match for the first 250 of each contribution from individuals for an eligible presidential candidate during primaries, and it can fund the major party nominees' general election campaigns. But the program also funded conventions, but they stopped that back in 2014. But many presidential candidates, because of the limits associated with these, have decided not to use the program. You might have seen also on your tax, when you're filling out your taxes, do you want to contribute to the presidential public funding program? Sometimes you might have checked that box. That's where that money comes from. But it doesn't get a lot of attention because a lot of candidates don't use it anymore because of the limits involved, and they rather, get money elsewhere. Let's just say that. But there is a presidential public funding of elections. Where else it's being used is, here's a list of states. And I did send Victoria a list of some resources where I've got some of this information and where you can do a deeper dive. Um, but here's all the states that currently have some form. This is statewide elections. And you can see when they enacted these. Many of these have been around since the 70s. Some of them are more recent, like New York is the most recent one, which is a small donor progressive match. Again, each state has a different program. Like these states up here, they're grant programs, and then you have matching programs. There's no state right now that does a voucher type program or a democracy dollar type program. We'd like to see Washington become one of the first states to do that, but we'd find if any other state took that on. We really like the voucher program because it puts the vouchers or the democracy dollars directly in the hands of constituents, where many of these other programs, it's not a direct democracy type program like the voucher program is. But you can see where some of the office that they cover, like in Arizona, it's a grant program. It covers state offices and legislative officers. But some places like Michigan and Maryland and New Jersey, they only cover like the governor or the governor and lieutenant governor in Vermont, where others do statewide executive offices as well as legislative offices, excuse me. And then I don't have time to go over all of these, but here's a list of all localities, whether it's a county or a city that has some type of program. Some of them recently passed, like in Maryland, in I'm going to slaughter this name. Arundel County, Maryland just did a small donor progressive match, where there's a little asterisk means they haven't been implemented yet. I do want to mention Oakland, California passed a voucher program similar to Seattle, but they have not secured the funding to get that started. So that has not been implemented yet, but that passed a couple of years ago. And that's they call it a democracy dollar program, but it's just like Seattle's, where people would get for $25 coupons, vouchers, or dollars to be able to donate. They're still working on, they don't have, their city council has to secure the funding for them, unlike Seattle's, where we secured the funding through the initiative, through that tax, the property tax I mentioned, in a levy. Other places do it in different ways. The legislature has to give them money. Sometimes it's a tax, sometimes it's a voluntary thing like you would do on your tax form. So the money comes from different places. And I will say, finding the money for this program is one of the most difficult pieces of it because, for example, here in Washington, we want a statewide program, but our biggest hurdle is where are we going to find the funding? Because we don't have a state income tax. We only have property and sales tax, and then there's a capital gains tax. That's actually trying to be repealed right now. It'll be on the ballot. But we didn't want to do another tax. So we're looking at alternatives. Would it be a fee for lobbying or fines for not disclosing public disclosure or abiding by our public disclosure laws, things like that. We're looking at alternatives. But every place does it a little differently. So you can see that many places, again, all do either matching or grants. Matching is probably the most popular one for sure. And we're trying to get more types of voucher type programs. But you can see the different positions that these various places, what positions they cover. Again, you may want to look in your area to see, does your area have public funding of elections? If not, do you want it? And we can talk a little bit about some of the ways you can do that. But we really want to encourage more places to adopt public funding because of all the benefits that I outlined earlier. So, how do we protect and expand public funding of elections? Ideally, people like me that work in the reform movement on and support public funding, we'd like to see all our elections be publicly funded and have a lot of limits around who can donate to elections and make it more constituent centered. But we are a long ways from there. But what we can do is we can protect and strengthen existing programs. If your state or jurisdiction has a program, you might want to reach out and find out who are the people that are protecting that program. How are we strengthening it? One of the groups that I work is People Powered Elections Washington, which is a coalition of many organizations, which is racially and economically, demographically diverse coalition that we are working on protecting the Seattle Voucher Program. I mentioned the levy renewal, but we've also been making recommendations to strengthen the program through a variety of different ways. And so you want to protect the programs and strengthen the ones that we have. Find out who is currently working on public funding of elections in your area. If it's not, is this an area you would like to take on and maybe build a coalition to work on getting public funding, whether it's in your city, county, or state? And there's many local and national organizations that are looking at developing more local and state programs. You can reach out to some of them to see, hey, are you working in our area? Are you interested in working on our area and how we can do that? You may also, if you have connections with your legislators in your state or your city council members or whoever it might be, find legislators who might be willing to sponsor and champion public funding legislation. Would they be introducing a bill for you? Or do you need to run a ballot campaign like we did in Seattle back in 2015? I didn't come onto the organization until the end of 2016, but it had already passed. But I was a part of the 2019 advisory council for the Seattle Voucher Program. So we on that campaign we worked on developing the online portal and things like that to help strengthen the program. But there's a lot of ways that you can work to help that get legislation passed, maybe work on a ballot initiative. Also, another way to do it is to present to county and city councils and their charter commissions. One thing we did this past year is the Tacoma, Washington Charter Commission, because charter cities, charter counties can often adopt programs like this. That's how Seattle was able to do it because they're a charter city. If you have a charter city or county in your jurisdiction, you can make presentations. Oftentimes, they have a charter commission every so many years. Tacoma, we presented on them developing a democracy voucher program in their area, and now their county council and city councils are taking a look at that, whether they want to adopt that or not. And explore funding options for new programs. What might be ways to fund a program? As I mentioned, this may be one of the more difficult areas for public funding of elections, but there are options, and you can talk to a lot of people to get creative about how you might do that. And then also work on public education and outreach. This is one way to get, if the public is interested in this and can put pressure on their elected leaders to adopt this, that can make a huge impact. And that's how the voucher program in Seattle got off the ground, is a lot of just interested people wanted to make it happen. And that's how that went forward. So now I've talked enough, and let's open it up to some questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and happy to answer questions. If you have comments, suggestions, I'm all ears.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I was looking in the chat too and trying to capture some questions in there and some reactions. So I can start with a couple of those, and then if there are any additional questions, you can put it in the chat or feel free to just raise your hand, and I will go ahead and call on you. But there was one early on from Kelsey Wright. I don't know if Kelsey's still here, but it just said, does not using it mean not accepting the democracy vouchers? And I don't know if Kelsey's still here and can potentially clarify on that question.
Well,
Yeah,
you
I'm
have,
still here. Yeah, I was just, you talked about how initially campaign managers were advising folks not to participate, not to use it. And I was just wondering exactly what that meant.
well, they were saying that, oh, I think some people were really skeptical of the program early on and thought it might inhibit them from getting donations from elsewhere if they use the program or put some limits on them. But over time, they realized that wasn't the case. So most people now use the program that run for office in Seattle. Does that answer your question?
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Great, thank you so much. And then there was another question I got from the chat that said, are there similar initiatives to Washington's voucher system being explored in other states?
Yeah, there mostly local jurisdictions have been looking at this. Like, for example, Austin, Texas had a ballot initiative a few years ago. Unfortunately, it didn't pass. There are several cities in California and other places around the country that are exploring voucher type programs. And many. I recently went to the Democracy Summit last year, and we had a whole group of folks that met up to talk about expanding vouchers and getting them in their area. Again, a lot of people are calling it democracy dollars. I can't even remember why we settled on the voucher program, but it kind of stuck, and so we're sticking with it. But whether it's a democracy dollars or voucher program, there's a lot of jurisdictions around the country looking at that right now and seeing how they can expand it either through their local councils and or through ballot initiatives.
Great, thanks, Cindy. I'm gonna keep reading them from the chat. Also, feel free to put up your hand if that is easier. How does Seattle spread the word about voucher availability?
That's a great question. I didn't cover that, but there's a certain ways they do that. First of all, they mail the vouchers to all registered voters in the city. So if you're a registered voter, you will get four $25 vouchers, physical vouchers in the mail. Also, too, you can apply for them if you're a legal resident, so you wouldn't get those mailed to you. You can apply for those through the online portal. Also, if you're not a registered voter, you can do that too. The city also gives out money to a variety of nonprofit organizations in the community to do outreach on the program, in particular to target those legal residents that aren't registered voters to know about it, that they're eligible. They also do things like bus ads, social media ads, and a variety of other things too. And then they rely on organizations like ours and our coalition and other people to spread the word. We do op-eds about the program and try to just get the word out about it. Even though the program's been in existence for 10 years, almost 10 years, 2017 was actually the first year it got implemented after the ballot initiative passed. Many people still don't know about the program, so we're continuing to do public outreach for that.
Great, thank you. Okay. Thank you so much, Cindy. This has been so informative. I'm reading this from Isabella. So Isabella, feel free to come off mic if you have anything additional to add, but I'll go ahead and read your question. Our organization has been doing a lot of candidate outreach for support for the Freedom to Vote Act, and we commonly hear that they don't support a taxpayer-funded system. What are the alternatives?
Yeah, good question. This goes again back to that question about how do we fund a program. Again, we didn't want to do a tax for the statewide program, so we've been looking at alternatives. For example, Connecticut funds their program through abandoned state properties, so they fund it through that way. Other ways to do that is through like taxes, like it could be a capital gains tax, things like that. So it wouldn't be a traditional tax. Other ways could be voluntarily where you have people donate to the program. Sometimes it's not viable to get enough money in there to keep it up. That's why Seattle chose a small property tax because we had limited options. Right now, we're looking at lobbying fees as a possibility to pay for it, or fines for violating our state disclosure laws, things like that. Um, it that, as I mentioned, that's the trickiest way to do it. Our state also has a abandoned assets program that there's like over $1 billion in that fund, though it gets lumped in with the general fund in the state. So we're looking at how can we portion maybe some of that out for the program. So I think depending on your area, you may need to like say, how are other things funded? Is there a way to fund the program like that? Because it is one of the more difficult hurdles to adopt a program like this is to have consistent, dedicated funding for it. We don't want to rely on the legislature to just randomly say, yeah, we're funding it this year and not next year, because the legislature changes from, election cycle to election cycle. We want to try to find a consistent way to fund the program. And that has been the most success for most programs around the country, is having a dedicated source. But there's no one answer to that, unfortunately. I think everybody has to look at how other things are funded in their jurisdiction and state and see how it might work for a program like this. Wish I had a better answer to that, but we're always looking how to fund these programs.
Thanks, Cindy. And I think that I hope that answers Diane's question as well on the matching funds. Where do they come from? Local businesses, taxes, wealthy donors. So hopefully that was covered in your answer as well. Thank you, Isabella. Thank you, Diane. Any other questions for Cindy or any other reactions? I also saw some notes of we need this in, I think it was Florida. We need this in San Diego. I'm so curious about your municipalities and states and cities where you live and whether or not you have a clean election program or if that's something you would be interested in advocating for. So feel free to share any additional reactions you have as well. Yes, Diane. Well, I'll share the recording once it's done. We'll make sure everybody gets a copy so that you can share it with your organizations as you see fit. So we'll go ahead and send that out once it's available, and it will also be in the Women's Power Collaborative platform as well. And then I'll go to a hand up from Watana.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for this presentation. I was the one that said we definitely need this in San Diego County. I was just at a local city council meet and greet last night, and for a district of 4,000 voters, she's got to raise over $50,000. It just seems like way too much. And that's for a small city that has 5 council people. So I'm just thinking about really that key part of public education and interest, and how do you have a toolkit for that? Is there some, so I'm not reinventing the wheel, if you could share that, or if you already did and I missed it, apologies. But again, thanks so much. This has got me thinking lots of good stuff.
Yeah, we don't have a dedicated toolkit for this. We lean on the city and what they do. And just to mention, I forgot to tell you how much the Seattle program, um, it's about $3 million a year, and we don't have the election every year, so that money gets added, but about $3 million a year are collected through that small property tax. I do want to mention it's like one of the smallest levies in the city. So it's a very small percentage of the budget overall in a city the size of Seattle. In a place like San Diego or another city, it's going to depend on the size of the city and the races being run. But I know there's a lot of folks in California working on this in LA, San Francisco, I think San Jose. I think even there might be some folks down in the San Diego area working on that, but I would reach out and see if you can find some other folks to work on with that. They might already have some good info for you in the California region to work on this. I just see Jessica's comment about would be great benefit for folks with disabilities. Absolutely. Again, folks that normally don't have the resources to run for elections, public funding can open the door for them. So definitely folks with disabilities and being able to get access um, eh, to money to run for election is huge. And also, as I mentioned, like with other programs, you have to agree to debating. So you can't like hide, you have to debate. And so that would open the door for people to give them access to the public. Most of those debates are either also virtual or recorded so you can watch them. So it gives you more exposure as well to your constituents when you have to debate. And it forces all the candidates to be able to be out there and share how they feel about certain policies.
Thanks, Cindy. And then there's a question from Tamaya that said, who or what entity should be approached for this idea, which I think you may have mentioned, but if you can go back to that, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I think it depends on your area. Like, for example, in Washington State, um, we've been working on campaign finance form and public funding for years, but some groups are new to that. So I began to reach out to groups like the League of Women Voters, but then also other groups like the Washington Bus, which is a youth-led organization. And now we have a really uh, very diverse coalition where we have Washington Community Alliance, Washington for Equitable Representation, Washington Bus, the League of Women Voters, Washington Conservation Action, and a variety of other groups, Urban League of Seattle, all come together because we recognize that dealing with money in elections is a huge issue. And we saw that public funding of elections and expanding that would help representation in our localities as well as across the state. So I think see who's in your area. There's also some national groups that support this, like Represent Us, obviously Represent Women, also groups like oh, what's the other one I was thinking of? Common Cause, Public Citizen, Campaign Legal Center, who's been huge. I want to give a big shout out to Campaign Legal Center because they've been super helpful with us in helping revive our state legislation bill that we've introduced. They were able to look it over, and they have great legal minds there that have been super helpful in us developing language for our bill. So they are a great resource for information if you want to get a bill introduced on a local or state level. They've been super helpful as well. So there's many local and national organizations that really support public funding. I also belong to a small donor financing national coalition. We meet once a month. That's part of our Declaration for American Democracy coalition that supports like the Freedom to Vote and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. But we also have a small donor working group that works on these issues, state and local levels.
Thanks, Cindy. I'll also add to, because I'm in public office here in Portland, Maine, and we're the first municipality in Maine that has enacted clean elections, and it's pretty new for us. It took about 7 years. So it was a 7-year project in the making. And so there was signature gathering, there were a lot of delays. There was like the state Supreme Court weighed in, and then it went through a charter commission here in Portland, and then that question was sent to the voters. So it was approved in 2022. So we have just now really started getting used to it and using it as we see it in campaign cycles. But I will say the difference in campaigning, the difference in fundraising, the difference in how the candidates interact and talk to the voters, I think has changed a little bit in terms of just broadening their voter base and starting a little bit earlier. And it's felt like we have closed the gap a little bit between the people running for office and the people that they're representing here. So I can speak highly in favor of clean elections and how it has changed the makeup of our city. And again, we're still in the really early years of it. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes as we grow as a city, but it's, so far so good. So I'm happy to have this presentation and get to actually live clean elections in real time here in Portland. So thank you, Cindy.
And Diane's asking about what Clean Elections is. Can you describe what that program is for Maine? You're
Sorry,
muted.
I was just muted. So I unmuted and then muted. So we have a clean elections program here in Portland, which, like I said, we enacted, I think it was in 2022. I'm actually looking at this note here because I want to get the dates right for you. But basically we have, in order to qualify and receive funding, the candidates have to have community support. So they have to get $5 contributions, and the requirements are basically, it's intended to encourage having broader constituent involvement. And again, making sure that the people running for office are actually accountable to the voters. And so they have to meet a certain threshold every couple of weeks with these $5 contributions. And so the point of clean elections here and everywhere is to make sure, again, that instead of giving very large contributions from privately owned companies or independently wealthy individuals, that in $5 donations, we can ensure that more individuals are able to run for office and are able to, again, have access to the ballot in ways that we have never seen before. So we have had it now for about 2 years. And so we're still kind of receiving feedback on people that really like it and people that don't like it so much. But I do think that, like I said, it has changed kind of the makeup of who is running for office because it's expensive to run for office. And now that we have this community support of being able to give these $5 donations, it feels like it's even the playing field a bit for people that, originally wouldn't have had the opportunity to raise this money.
And most clean election campaigns are like a grant-based program, and I believe Portland is also a grant-based program. But again, like Victoria mentioned, like with many programs, there's certain things you have to do, like collect so many small donations. For the voucher program, you have to collect so many $10 donations, depending on which position you're running for, and also collect certain amounts of signatures. But each one is a little different, but usually you have to get some type of community support. Like Victoria mentioned, they have to collect so many $5 donations within so much time, so often. There are parameters that are put around that to keep the program viable, but also keep them engaged and for the small donors and accountability to constituents.
Any other questions for Cindy? We've got about 5 minutes left.
I'll put my contact information in the chat, my our website and my email address. We host a weekly democracy happy hour. I know Alyssa's been on there before. I saw Brittany's here. She's been on the program. I'll put that all in the chat. We do it on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. and that's specific time, by the way. 8 p.m. Eastern. But if you want to reach out to me, my email's in the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if I don't know the answer, I can probably refer you to someone that does know the answer.
Great. If there are no other questions, I can give you a couple minutes of your day back. I'm just doing a quick scan to make sure I don't miss anything. Haven't missed anything in the chat. But I want to say, first of all, Cindy, thank you so much for being willing to provide this really valuable information, as you can see in the chat and with the questions. It's been really incredible for our members. And so I really appreciate you being willing to give a lunch and learn. Cindy and I were laughing earlier about how long ago we planned this, and I went and checked, and it was in February when we actually planned this lunch and learn. So the fact that it is now September, it's super exciting to just see, how far we've come with these lunch and learns and how many incredible members with so much talent and knowledge to share have really been willing to step forward and provide this information to us. So thank you to Cindy. And also thank you to all of you for spending your lunch or your breakfast with us. We really appreciate it. And as I said, I will share the recording once it's available. And I will also make sure that I share the slide deck, the resources that Cindy had mentioned that she sent to me, Cindy's contact information as well, Democracy Happy Hour information, so that way you can stay engaged with all of Cindy's work and the work of Fix Democracy First. If you have any questions for me specifically, don't hesitate to reach out as well to myself or another Represent Women staff member. And we will see you in October for, I don't know that I could call it a lunch and learn. It's a lunch and learn / a Represent Women event that I'm gonna, I guess, plug now, which is happening at the end of October. It is a Seneca Falls Town Hall, and that is gonna take place of our lunch and learn for October. And then in November, I think we'll do a little election debrief, which will be our November lunch and learn, which will probably also be hosted by Represent Women, but hoping to just debrief on the election. And we're nonpartisan over here at Represent Women, but just having a space for all of us to exhale, regardless of what way that election goes. So we'll probably do that in November, and then December, we will leave open and free since everybody will be traveling. So we really only have 2 more times that we're gathering this year. Which is crazy, but I'm super excited. So more information to come on that. Stay tuned on your emails and on the Women's Power Collaborative platform. And again, reach out with any questions. Thank you all so much. And the last thing I'll say is we are planning already for Lunch and Learns for 2025. So be on the lookout for that sign-up sheet. And if you are somebody that's like, oh my gosh, I have so much to share about my organization or a topic that you are interested in, or you want to bring a topic to the group and have a facilitated discussion, I will send out the form. You can fill it out, even if it's not a fully formed idea. Go ahead and complete it, and we will talk to you because we want to have as many of our partners and allies sharing their information and resources as it relates to women's representation. So the 2025 sign-up sheet for Lunch and Learns will be coming to you very soon. And I look forward to seeing you all between now and October. So thank you so much for joining, and we will talk soon. And thank you again, Cindy. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Take care.